Alligator Baby by Robert Munsch, illustrated by Martchenko. Once upon a time, one night, Kristen's mother woke up and yelled, "A baby! A baby! I'm having a baby!" Kristen's father jumped up, zoomed around the room, got dressed, and grabbed Kristen's mother by the hand. They ran downstairs to the car and drove off really fast. Vroom! Unfortunately, they got lost. They didn't go to the hospital. They went to the zoo. But it was okay. Kristen's mother had a lovely baby. Then they drove home and knocked on their front door. Blam, 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 blam. Kristen opened the door, and there was her mother holding something all wrapped up. "Kristen," she said, "would you like to see your new baby brother?" "Oh, yes," said Kristen. So Kristen lifted up the bottom of the blanket. She saw a long green tail and said, "That's not a people tail." Kristen lifted up the middle of the blanket, saw a green claw, and said, "That's not a people claw." Kristen lifted up the top of the blanket, saw a long green face with lots of teeth, and said, "That's not a people face. That is not my baby brother." "Now, Kristen," said her mother, "don't be jealous." Just then the baby reached up and bit Kristen's mother on the nose. She yelled, "Ah!" Then the baby reached up and bit her father on the nose. He yelled, "Ah! That's not a people baby," said Kristen. "That's an alligator baby." "Goodness," said her mother, "we've got the wrong baby." So Kristen put the alligator baby into the fish tank, and her mother and father drove back to the zoo. They came back in an hour and knocked on the door. Blam, 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 blam. Kristen opened the door, and her mother said, "Would you like to see your new baby brother?" "Oh, yes," said Kristen. Kristen lifted up the bottom of the blanket, saw a fishy tail, and said, "That's not a people tail." Kristen lifted up the middle of the blanket, saw a flipper, and said, "That's not a people flipper." Kristen lifted up the top of the blanket, saw a face with whiskers, and said, "That's not a people face. That is not my baby brother." "Now, Kristen," said her mother, "don't be jealous." Just then the baby reached up with its flipper and flapped her father's face. "Whap, whap, 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 whap." He yelled, "Ah! It's a seal baby! We've got the wrong baby!" So Kristen put the seal baby in the bathtub, and her mother and father drove back to the zoo. They came back in an hour and knocked on the door. Blam, 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 blam. They said, "Kristen, would you like to see your new baby brother?" "Oh, yes," said Kristen. She lifted up the bottom of the blanket, saw a very hairy leg, and said, "That's not a people leg." She lifted up the middle of the blanket, saw a very hairy arm, and said, "That's not a people arm." She lifted up the top of the blanket, saw a very hairy face, and said, "That's not a people face. That is not my baby brother." "No, Kristen," said her mother. "Don't be jealous." Then the baby reached up with its feet and grabbed her mother's ear and her father's ear, and they both yelled, "Ah! It's a gorilla baby! We've got the wrong baby!" "Let me do it," said Christine. So her mother and father put the gorilla baby on the chandelier in the living room, and Christine went off to the zoo on her bicycle. First, Christine looked in the snake cage. No people babies. Then Christine looked in the wombat cage. No people babies. Then Christine looked in the elephant cage. No people babies. Then she stopped and listened. From far away she heard, "Where, where, 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 where." "That's more like it," said Christine. She followed the sound. It was coming from the gorilla cage. Christine looked at the mommy gorilla and said, "Give me my baby brother." The gorilla jumped away and wouldn't give the baby back at all. Then the people baby reached up and bit the gorilla on the nose. The gorilla yelled, "Ah!" and handed the baby to Christine. Christine jumped on her bicycle and pedaled home. Christine knocked on the door. Blam, 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 blam. When her parents opened it, she said, "Would you like to see your new baby?" Christine's mother lifted up the bottom of the blanket and said, "Look, people legs." She lifted up the middle of the blanket and said, "Look, people hands." She lifted up the top of the blanket and said, "Look, a people face." Christine's mother picked up the baby and gave it a big hug. Her father took the baby and gave it a big hug. And her mother said, "Christine, Christine, you got the baby back. Good for you." "But what are we going to do with all these other babies?" yelled Christine's father. "There's a seal baby in the bathtub and an alligator baby in the fish tank and a gorilla baby hanging from the chandelier. We should take them back to the zoo." But Christine looked out the window and said, "I don't think we'll have to do anything at all." And everything was okay until Christine's mother had twins. See you next time. Bye. 다음에 또 만나요. 여러분 안녕.